Hello, I'm John Fisher, and we are just getting set up for tonight's performance of Bedroom, which starts at 8:05 p.m. Eastern Standard Time or 5:05 p.m. Pacific. So this is a technical setup and test. The performance starts at 8:05 or 5:05 Eastern Standard Time or Pacific. We're just going to run some tests. So just to make sure everything's the way we want it, we're beginning with a series of tests. This is test 1. Okay, and now we're going to go over to test 2. So this is test 2. And now we are going to do test 3. Okay, this is test 3. Okay, so now we're going to do a series of tests on Zoom and Facebook Live. Our first test is a test for echo. Do we have an echo or a mechanical sound or electronic sound in the voice? Is the voice clear and not echoing? Now we're going to do a sync test. And now we are going to do a Zoom test. Okay, and now we are going to do a loss of screen test. Okay, good. And now we're doing a distance from microphone test. Just trying to find out what the distance is. And quality of sound test. We're now far from the microphone and we're testing for the quality of the sound. We're testing for the quality of the sound and distance from the microphone. Quality of sound and distance from the mic. Okay, great. So now we're going to go over to our Facebook Live platform, and I'll be right back with you in a second. Hello, I'm John Fisher, and we're just doing a test for some tech setups for Bedroom tonight. If you'd like to join us for the performance, it's at 8:05 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 5:05 p.m. Pacific. It's free. It's right here on Facebook Live. You can also watch it on Zoom. If you want to watch it on Zoom, go to johnfisher.biz, johnfisher.biz. It's a free performance, and you can sign up there for Zoom or just watch it right here. Right now, we are testing out for tech. So we are testing for echo and mechanical sounds, electronic sounds in the voice. We're testing for sync. And we are testing for our Zoom feature. Great, and we are testing for loss of screen. Okay, good. And now we're testing for distance of sound. What is the sound like at a distance? We're testing for distance of sound from the microphone. This is a test for distance of sound, quality of sound at a distance from the microphone. This is a test for quality of sound at a distance. Okay, and I'll be right back. Hello, we're back. We're going to try a couple more tests. We're setting up for tonight's performance, which will be at 8:05 p.m., 5:05 if you're watching in Pacific time, 8:05 Eastern Standard Time, 5:05 Pacific time. This is just a technical setup and test. So let's try some things. A couple more things. Okay. So let's do a test. This is our first test. Okay, and then this is our second test. And this is our third test. Oh, there we go. This is our third test. Thank you, and we'll be right back. Hello, we're back for some more tests. So this is test number one, test one. Okay, and now we're going to do test number two. And now we're going to do test number three. This is test number three. Okay, thank you. So we'll be back at 8:05 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the beginning of the show, 5:05 p.m. Pacific for the show. This is Bedroom. You can watch it right here on Facebook Live, or you can watch it on Zoom. If you want to watch it on Zoom, go to johnfisher.biz. That's JOHNFISHER.biz, and you can sign up for free to watch it on either platform. But that is just about that for now. Let me just check one thing. Great, we'll be back later. Yay! Hello, I'm John Fisher. We're going to begin in a few minutes. This is just a last minute sound test. So we're going to do a series of tests just to check our sound before we begin. Let's see. Okay, good. So this is test one. Okay, and now we're going over to test two. This is test two. And now we're going over to test three. So this is test three. Thank you. Thank you very much. And we will begin shortly. Da 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 bum 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 da 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 bum 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 bum. There I sat, watching Gilbert and Sullivan's trial by jury. And the whole time I watched it, I was trying to figure out who somebody was. There was somebody on stage, and I knew who she was. I knew it, but I couldn't put a name to it. I couldn't even really recognize the face fully, but I knew that I knew. This is just a couple of years ago. I have a very clear memory, and I sat there through the entire performance, and finally, right near the end, I got it. I got it. I knew who it was, and it made perfect sense. Yes, yes, it had to be her. Many years earlier, I was teaching at UC Berkeley. I taught acting, and people think when you teach that you remember all the good students, or you also remember all the bad ones, right? But it's not that simple, right? Because first of all, the good students aren't necessarily the most talented ones. They're the ones who have talent, but they also want to succeed. They want to take what you've got to teach them and bring it in and try it out and see if they can grow as an actor. And the bad ones that you remember, it's not because they don't have talent. A lot of them have a lot of talent, but they're just really resistant. They say, oh, I've done that exercise before, or I've done that. It doesn't work for me, or that doesn't work for me. Or you're not helping me. They're just frustrated the whole time. So you become frustrated. But then there's this other group of actors in every class, and you reach out to them and you try to get them to grow as a performer. And for some reason, they try a little bit, but for some reason, they don't get there. And those aren't necessarily the people that you forget, but you have a very unique experience of them because you're not in love with them and you're not totally frustrated by them, but you're somewhere in between. And that was Jen. Jen was amazing, right? This was a huge public school. UC Berkeley, massive, right? There are 30,000 students, 50,000 graduate students and administrators, all that other stuff. Tons of buildings. It's like a city, hustle and bustle. It's crazy at UC Berkeley. And people go there for the craziness. This big, bustling public school operating like a city, like a massive city. That's why people go. Now, Jen never seemed like she belonged there. She was very refined. She was very wholesome. She didn't have an edge. She seemed like she should be at like one of these really Tony places like Vassar or Swarthmore or Sarah Lawrence, right? Someplace special like that. And it kind of showed in her acting because people go to Berkeley to go crazy, to explore things, but she didn't. She was very refined, very controlled. And I always told her, you have to get an edge. You have to get an edge. You have to experiment. You have to allow yourself to embarrass yourself, humiliate yourself on stage. Do it. You might learn something. You learn something about your capabilities. Okay, well, I was not getting through to her. And she chose as her final scene, a scene from Lovers and Other Strangers, a great play. And in this scene, a wife is sitting on her bed and her husband is watching TV. And she's wearing this beautiful negligee, right? And she's just sitting there, waiting for him to pay attention to her. And she finally says, I'm waiting. Right? And Jen had chosen this character, but she performed it with no sensuality, none whatsoever. There was nothing. She just said, I'm waiting. I mean, it didn't even sound annoyed. It was just completely neutral. I'm waiting. I told her, Jen, you have to go crazy up there. You have to try something radical, try something wild, try to say, I'm waiting, I want it. Come on, husband, get up here, husband. Show me, husband. I want it. Come on, husband, come on. I mean, I wanted her to go crazy on stage, just as an experiment. I told her, you have to show us you have an imagination. I know you've got one. I'm not saying you don't, but you have to have a performed imagination, a demonstrable imagination, an imagination that we can see, that you use, and you can make yourself ridiculous. And you won't necessarily use that in the scene, right? But you might find something that inspires you, that loosens you up, that makes you ready, that makes you do something subtle, something imaginative, something provocative. And it might not be right, but it might be. You have to take that adventure. And there are many great examples of this, like people who have a lot of command, a lot of presence. I think of like Gina Rowlands, right? She's a beautiful actress, all that beautiful blonde hair, very stately, very in command, but she did crazy things. She was like in those movies by John Cassavetes where she was like totally drunk all the time, right? Going on stage drunk, and she was totally lustful sometimes, and like crawling around, begging, I want a kiss, give me a kiss. And she was like crazy in movies. And also in Gilda, she had like a machine gun. She was shooting up mobsters. It was like, and it was her grace and polish that played against that wildness, that craziness, that imaginativeness. Another example, grace and polish, is Grace Kelly, right? I mean, she was very refined. She was like a princess. But then when she got in the room with Cary Grant, suddenly something happened. It was very subtle, but she kind of melted. And she got very husky. And it looked like she was going to take her clothes off right there for Cary Grant. You know, and it was subtle, but it wasn't simple. It was very complex. And, you know, she was not as great at it as Gina Rowlands. And eventually she got out of movies and, you know, she became a real princess like Princess Grace because, you know, she didn't really have that wild stuff that you needed. And that's what I thought Jen needed so desperately. It was weird because I wasn't the only person in the drama department who thought this, because all the other faculty, none of them ever cast her in a play. They didn't. And it's because, you know, people go to Berkeley to be crazy, to try marijuana, to try radical politics, to protest things, to stay up all night partying and being crazy and to explore themselves, right? But not Jen. She always maintained her dignity. She's walking every morning saying, hi, John, how are you? It's good to see you. And I'd be like, hey, Jen, how are you? And it was weird because I felt like I was in the presence of one of my mother's friends who I loved dearly, but there was too much refinement for somebody who was only 20. I found out something really interesting about Jen, though. This explained a lot. She was in the music department, right? Yeah, the music department. And, you know, the classical music department at UC Berkeley is not like any of the other creative arts departments. I mean, all the other creative arts departments, dance and like painting and stuff like that, they're all like, wow, they're crazy. They're all over the place. They're insane, right? They'll do anything, but not the music department. They are so disciplined, right? Because if you're going to sing Bach or Mozart, you better treat that music like it's an equation. You better treat it like it's a science. It's the X that you got to figure out. And that was the department she was in. She sang classical music, which so impressed me. And I heard her sing once, and it was beautiful. It was gorgeous. But it wasn't going to help her in drama, which is not a science. It's a creative act, an act of explosion, at least as an exploration. And then you can refine it later. But she never let herself explode. And I was always encouraging her. And she always said, John, I want to. I do. You just make me laugh. I'm like, I don't want to make you laugh. I want you to explode. But I couldn't get her to do it. It was so interesting that way. And her final scene, she sat there on the bed and she said, well, I'm waiting. I mean, if you were a real queen, you could do it. If Queen Elizabeth did that, well, I'm waiting. Everybody would love it, right? On a bed in negligee, they would love it. But you got to be a real queen to pull off that kind of thing. I mean, that's so subtle. It has to come from heritage. So I never really felt like I connected with her, right? Not at all. But she got me thinking about classical music because a number of years earlier, before she came into my class, I had fallen in love with opera. And what I loved about opera was the music. Da-da! I mean, those melodies, those luscious melodies. And one thing you notice in operas, there's never any beds. There are very few beds in opera. Why? Because the sex, the sensuality, the passion is in the music. Think of Puccini in Giannischicchi, that luscious, caressing music. Da 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 da. So like a caress, you don't even need the caress. Ba da ba 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 da ba 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 da ba 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 da ba 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 ba. The sex is in the music. The sensuality is right there in the notes. It's incredible. And you think of La Boheme, okay, in the first scene, they don't have sex. I mean, they don't get into bed, right? When Rodolfo meets Mimi, they don't get into bed. But he sings a beautiful aria to her. She sings a beautiful aria to him, and then they sing a duet. Think about it. It is sex. He does for her, she does for him, then they do it for each other. It's magical. And Jen had reminded me that even though she couldn't bring the necessary passion and sensuality to a sexy scene on stage, she had the keys to the kingdom because she could sing. She had this grace, this polish. I had gone to UC Berkeley when I was a kid to create. And when I got out, I wanted to explore music. I wanted to explore opera. That was the new thing for me. Now, here's the thing. I can't sing opera. Well, I mean, okay, I won't sing opera. Okay, so that's fine. That's fine. But I wanted to direct it. I wanted to be part of the creative process of that spectacle, the wonderfulness of opera. So I decided after I graduated from undergraduate, I was 21 years old, that I'd go to the capital of opera in the United States, New York City. There it is, the capital of opera. Yeah, maybe in the world. A city with two huge opera companies, the City Opera Company and the massive Metropolitan Opera, where everybody sings, where all the stars were made. But what modern people don't know is there are dozens of other companies. And I would go there and I would work with them. So there I was. It was me on the outside, out in the great big world, me. And I couldn't get a job directing opera yet. I didn't have any creds, right? Nobody knew who I was. So I got a job as an assistant stage manager. I would work backstage and I would learn the ropes, literally, because I was in charge of the guys on the rail. These are the guys who fly the sets in and out. I was so excited. I was like in charge. And these were like union guys. They were like in their 40s, big guys, strong guys. And I guess one night, I don't know what I said. All of a sudden, one of them turned on me and said, "Shut the fuck up, man. Jesus, if you don't shut up, I'm gonna bounce you." And he walked away from me. I thought, oh my God, I've never been threatened like that. Snot-nosed kid, right? Doesn't even know what he's saying. And the thing was, I wasn't even working with the singers. I was backstage, supervising the ropes, the fly system. I thought, this is crazy. I mean, I'll keep working as an assistant stage manager to get some creds to prove that I can do stuff.
but I don't want to work with this opera company anymore. But I did notice one weird thing about opera. It's always double cast. Even at the Metropolitan Opera, there's multiple casts for the same opera, right? Which I don't know what that's about. It's like singers can only sing opera once a week, or they're trying to spread out the opportunities, the money. I don't know. But opera is always double cast. And the bad thing is you end up thinking, oh, that's the A team. This is the B team, right? It creates that kind of thing for people working on the show. That's one thing I learned about opera. I went to a smaller company. I decided this one was too big. It was the Bronx Opera, very professional. But I decided, no, it's just too weird backstage with these union stagehands. I went to a smaller one. Everybody got paid, but it wasn't union. It was called the Bel Canto Opera. And it did a spectacular production of Robert Schumann's Genoveva, his only opera. So the first one I'd worked on was The Ballad of Baby Doe, an American opera. And now this was a German opera. Robert Schumann's response to Wagner, he said, this is what opera is going to sound like, not Parsifal, it's going to sound like this, Genoveva. I was learning so much about opera. And again, I was an assistant stage manager. I was backstage, and everybody was really nice. They weren't professionals, they weren't union, but they were semi-pro, and it was very smooth. And I enjoyed it a lot more. But it had the two casts, and one was definitely better in my view. But I was still frustrated. I wasn't getting anywhere. Nobody was going to let me direct an opera just based on being a stage manager for two operas. So I went to a much smaller opera company, the Brooklyn Opera Theater. Now, those other two had, weird names, but they both performed in Manhattan. This one performed in Brooklyn, at Park Slope, in this little music hall. It was adorable. There was like 100 seats and this stage, and they said they would hire me as director. I was so thrilled. I'd be right there with the singers. It'd be great. So I built this beautiful set for them. And the first opera was Giannischiki. And it was great because these singers had so much passion. It wasn't like my idea of opera, where all of the music carried all the sensuality. They added sensuality. They added comedy. The lead was this wonderful baritone who had studied with the great Tito Gobi, and he was hysterical. And then there was all that music, all that glorious sensual music. Da 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 da. I loved going to work. It was a dream. And I gave them all sorts of funny things to do, and they were really responsive. They took them, they really ran with them, and that changed my view of opera singers. No longer did I think they should just stand there and sing because they had these beautiful sounds to make, and that carried the sensuality. No, they would add to it. They would use their bodies to express themselves. So they hired me to direct another opera, La Boheme. Oh my God, this was like jackpot. I love this opera. And the great thing about this opera company is it didn't double cast. I only had one cast for each of them. It was small, but it was great. And that great scene, remember Aria duet? Yeah, that glorious scene, the climax of that scene where the two of them sing, oh, I would just melt every night. Here's the problem though. Nobody paid me enough. I couldn't get paid enough. Nobody operating in these opera companies got paid enough. You had to be at the Metropolitan Opera to make enough money. It was crazy. We got paid, we got a stipend, but it wasn't enough to live on. So I had to work all day long, 40-hour week at a law library, the Brooklyn Law School Law Library. And then I had to get on, a conveyance, a subway, and commute. Sometimes it took an hour and a half to get to rehearsals because they were all over the place. And then we had a 4-hour rehearsal. And I was getting like 4 hours of sleep a night in this weather, in that weather out there. You know what happens? You just get sick. You end up getting sick. So me and everybody else in the company were just sick all the time. It was crazy. And I finally realized, you know what? I had to find a place where I could create and make a living at it. So maybe I'd come back to opera someday. Maybe I'd find out more about what it was to sing and act and be sensual in the voice and the body. But for now, I had to solve the problem of a living in the arts. So I went back to graduate school. I was going to get my PhD. I decided what I would do is become a college professor. Yeah, I would teach drama, dramatic literature, and theater history at the college level. So I entered the PhD program at UC Berkeley, and it was incredible. I found myself. It was amazing. It was magical. The first thing I discovered was I will never be an academic. I could never be a college professor. I'm not cut out for it. But while I was there, I discovered I could write and direct plays. I put on these huge plays, right? With dozens of students, with songs and dances and scenery flying out. There were spectacles, all of them. It was incredible. And I found out I could teach. And somehow or other, I was making just enough money to keep going, writing and directing plays, pretending I was a graduate student, and teaching. And the teaching was lovely because I would push the actors. I would push them to find the thing that they didn't have yet. So some of them would come to me and they were crazy. They were wonderful. They were like, wow. They were like all over the place. They were insane. They were wild on stage. I love wild people on stage. I loved it, but I couldn't understand what they were saying. I was like, wait, okay, that was great. Thumbs up, but what are you saying? Articulate, slow down, speak clearly, okay? Others were like Jen, completely constrained. You could hear them. Beautiful presence, beautiful diction, but they had no craziness. I was like, give it to me. Give me some craziness. Come on, give it to me. I need craziness. I want you to be crazy. And then you can hone it. You can turn it into something refined and beautiful. But you've got to find your performed imagination. You've got to show it. It's got to come out. So I taught. And I felt like I inspired people, right? To let go, because I was kind of crazy myself. And I was always trying to grow as myself as an actor. At the end of each term, I would meet with the students and I would talk to them about what they wanted to do next. Okay? What was their next big step as an artist? And so I met with Jen and I said, Jen, what do you want to do when you graduate? I want to be an actress, John. I want to go on stage and act. Well, Jen, you've got a lot to offer. You've got great presence, great poise. You've got that beautiful voice, but you're going to have to find an edge. You're going to have to figure out how to play villains and seductresses and people in love. You're going to have to explore, Jen. I know, John. I know. I'll get there. I will. And I hope that one day I can work with you. Jen, you are such a pro and such a good guy. I hope I can work with you one day too. Thanks, John. She got an A because she worked hard and she was always ready and she was always prepared. And I knew she had a lot of talent in her, but I had not seen that explosive expressiveness, right? Well, I got out of school. After 10 years, I finally got a PhD. I was so busy. I was actually making a living writing and directing plays. It was great. And they were done in New York. They were done in Los Angeles, Seattle, San Francisco, Berkeley. I was bouncing around doing shows all the time and teaching and making a living. And eventually, though, it all kind of fell apart. It was like dark days, yeah? All of a sudden, it just cost too much to put on my plays. Not to me. I wasn't getting paid that much. It was just they were too big, too boisterous. There was too much spectacle, too much singing, dancing, choreography, instruments. It just became too expensive and nobody was hiring me. I was having a real hard time finding work. So I thought, okay, well, I'll just teach full time. I'll just be a teacher. I couldn't get a teaching job. There are 5 million people out there who want to teach acting. That's all they want to do. And I was like in competition with them. I wanted to do it part-time, support my writing habits, no, I couldn't get a job teaching and I was desperate. I was desperate for work. So what do you do when you're desperate for work? You start to network. So I went and I saw a friend's play. Now, before that, I called up everybody I could think of and say, I'm really looking for work. Do you know of anything? Can you give me something? And everybody knew I was looking and they said, I will keep my eye out. But I wouldn't sit still. I would go to any play that I knew a friend was directing and I would watch and then I'd go backstage and compliment and say, hey, I'd really like to work for this company. How do I do it? Or, hey, can you hire me to work? I love your work. I was out there. I put myself out there. So my friend Phil was directing a production of Little Night Music, which is one of Stephen Sondheim's many masterpieces, a great musical. And in this production, strangely enough, it was full of beds. It wasn't an opera. Remember I said operas don't have beds? musicals have a lot of beds, and this is a very sensual, passionate, romantic, sexy opera. And the way Phil did it, there were beds all over the place. And I thought, wow, he's doing a good job. And the curtain came up at the beginning, and there were 4 chorus members on stage. I thought, oh, that's interesting. And they started singing. They were singing about sex and romance. And I realized one of them was Jen. There she was, incredible. And she was singing beautifully, and she looked stunning. She looked great. It was set in the 19th century. She was stunning in period dress. But she had no passion, no sensuality, no sex in her. And they were singing about it. And the other actors were like very subtle. They weren't like, yeah, they weren't like me, like, yeah, like I would have done it, right? But they weren't like that, but they were very subtle. She had no subtlety, nothing. Well, it actually was a very good production and beautifully mounted. And I went backstage and I said to Phil, I said, hey, that was great. I was really impressed. Thank you so much for inviting me. I was so happy to be here. Thanks for coming, John. Listen, do you direct opera? Yeah, as a matter of fact, I do. I directed opera in New York at a couple of companies there. Yeah, the Brooklyn Opera Theater, and I was a stage manager. Do you like Carmen? Yeah, well, who doesn't? It's the greatest opera ever, isn't it? Would you like to direct a production of Carmen? I'd love to. What is somebody looking for a director? Could you start like tomorrow? Why? What's happening? Well, I'm directing the production of Carmen, but I'm going to quit. And I'd like to recommend somebody who I think can do it, just to show that, I'm just not just jumping the ship. Okay, but why are you quitting? This opera company is chaotic. They are insane. Oh, okay. So you'd have to be very organized and very tough. Oh, all right. Well, I wasn't in a position to say no. I mean, it sounded kind of terrifying, but I was like, no, I need the money. So I was like, well, how do we do this? I'm going to tell the executive director to call you, and she'll probably have you come to rehearsal tomorrow night. Oh, okay. The next morning, I got a call from the executive director of this opera company. John, Phil told me about you. You're going to come and direct Carmen for us, I understand. Well, if you'll have me, I'd love to. I'd be honored. You must start tonight. Come to Sausalito. I will email you the address. Welcome aboard, Carmen. So I went to this rehearsal and I walked in. There's like all these people and there's like all these instruments. It's a big deal, this production of Carmen. And I have to say, I saw the Carmen. That's what worried me the most. The Carmen, an opera singer. Will she be sensual? Will she be seductive? Right? And she was working a number when I walked in with the music director, and she was great. She was amazing. She was doing the habanera, and she was so sexual. She was like, dun 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 dun, 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 dun. She was like wonderful. Now, she didn't have the biggest voice. It wasn't like a thunderous voice that could fill the Metropolitan Opera, but she had a good voice, and it'd be good enough for our purposes because the theater was, it was like 200, 300 seat house. It wasn't massive, right? I thought, wow, that's my Carmen. That's incredible. Well, then I met the rest of the cast. Slowly. The rehearsal was supposed to go from 7 to 11 o'clock, right? Well, people were drifting in at 7:30, 8 o'clock, 8:30. I didn't get the whole cast until close to 9. It was crazy. And then they had to spend an hour doing music with the music director, and I got them for 1 hour a night, right? To do all of this blocking, this massive opera. And there were so many of them. It's like the cast of dozens of people. There were children and dancers and choristers and soldiers. And it was like, all I could do in an hour is get people on and off stage. It's like, everybody, come on. Okay, stop. Stand there, sing. Okay, everybody off. Next, everybody on, sing, off. Now, it was like, okay, now everybody come on and fight. No, that was phony. That was phony. You're all going like this. No, that's phony. That's what, please, trust me, it's phony. Make it look real. No, don't hurt each other. Just do like a nap, like, right? And that would take an hour. And then they would forget it. So you'd have to review it every night. And it was like impossible. I could not organize this thing. And all I was doing was directing traffic. It's like, all right, you off, you off, you off, you. It was like I was standing in the middle of a traffic, of an intersection, directing traffic, right? It was like being an air traffic controller at the airport. I was trying to keep planes from crashing into each other. The actors used to literally bump into each other. They had to have everything diagrammed, and it was insane. I couldn't do it. It just barely happened. The production just barely happened. And it was the thing that got me through it was the Carmen, who was wonderful. Now, her Don Jose, her boyfriend, he was also good. He was very good. He was strong, but he was like 3 times her age, which is fine. I'm not like an ageist, right? It's fine. It's fine. But he had dentures, okay? Now, his teeth did not fall out on stage. I'm not going to exaggerate. I'm not going to lie, but he was very concerned about them all the time. And a lot of times I noticed him on stage going, I don't know what he was doing. And one time during the performance, he did, right? Okay, all right. So it didn't happen a lot. And I'm not sure anybody else noticed, but it was like a constant source of anxiety for me. But okay, the 2 of them were pretty good. But it was like ridiculous. I just persisted until opening night. And on opening night, I was like horrified. I was like, no. I'm not the director. I'm not the director. No, don't look at me. Don't look at me. No, I'm not the director. No, I'm not the director. Well, I was shocked, because the executive director was really pleased. I thought it looked like a boring mess, but people did come on and off. They did know what to do. They did hit their spots, but it was really dull because I hadn't had any time to work with them. But she called me up after it opened and she said, John, that was magnificent. Really? Oh, yes. How was it magnificent? Your organization. I was so impressed. It was wonderful, John. Oh, thank you. Our next opera is coming up, and we need a director. Are you interested in directing Hansel and Gretel? Frankly, I don't know Hansel and Gretel. Oh, no. It's a famous opera. Mostly it's performed for children. That's why we do it at Christmas time. It was composed by Engelbert Humperdinck. Engelbert Humperdinck? I was like, isn't that the lounge singer from the 60s? I can't wait a moment more. I say quando, quando, quando. No. He was not a lounge singer in the 60s. He was a student of Wagner, a very accomplished musician. It is a classic, John. Hansel and Gretel. Well, I'll listen to the music. This is a very weird opera. I did not know it at all. I mean, it is a classic, and I just had never heard of it, right? And so I listened to music, and it was very weird. It was a little bit Wagnerian. But the super weird thing about it is Hansel and Gretel are like 8, 10-year-old children. These roles are not played by children. They're played by adults, female adults. Hansel is a mezzo-soprano, adult, and Gretel is a soprano, adult. I thought, this is just weird. But I met a lot of the cast, and they'd done it the year before, and they were, pretty good. And there was this beautiful set. The set was the cutest thing ever. And the music director was great. I loved him. And, I need the money. So I was like, okay, I don't know if I can go through more chaos, but we will try. We will try to get beyond air traffic control, right? We will try to direct like real people direct. And I didn't really look at the cast list. I don't know why, or I did, and I didn't really take in the names. Because at the first rehearsal with Hansel and Gretel, I met my Hansel and Gretel. Well, Hansel showed up, and it would be played by Yuki. I never met Yuki before, but Yuki was great. So sweet, so charming, beautiful, stunning, loud, mezzo voice. I loved Yuki. And then right after she came in the room and introduced herself, the Gretel introduced herself. She walked right in. It was Jen. Hi, Jen. Hi, John. It is so great to see you. I'm so glad you are doing this. And I'm so happy to be working with you, John. I'm so looking forward to it. And I'm going to try to give you everything you want. Jen, you already got it with that beautiful voice. I'm just fine tuning. Well, you can fine tune me all you want, John. I was in love with her. It was great. There she was. Before, her dignity had been her undoing, but we were working on scenes in a play. Now her dignity would be perfect. If I could just get her to be like, a little girl, right? But why not? She was playful. I'd seen her be playful, just silly. She was charming. She could do it. I was so excited. And it was a model collaboration. I loved it. It was great working on that opera. It was so exciting to go to rehearsal every week because, Jen was wonderful as Gretel. She was so cute and fun and innocent. And she was funny at times, just by acting so innocent and wide-eyed. And Yuki was an incredible Hansel. He acted like this big, strong little boy. I'm strong. I'm strong. And it just came off as like, Shirley Temple. That's what he was really like. Shirley Temple. I'm the good shit lollipop. That was Yuki's interpretation. It was great. And the witch was a consummate comedian. She was great. And there was no chorus to speak of. So we didn't have to worry about all that traffic control nonsense, right? There was the children's chorus off stage. Who cares? They sang into a microphone. I didn't have to worry about blocking them till the very end. And then they just stood in a line and got turned into angel fairies or something. It was really simple. And another thing, there was no sex. It was about children being kidnapped by a witch who was going to eat them, right? There was no sex in this. So I didn't have to worry about that with Jen. I only had one regret. We were rehearsing and everybody was moving too slowly. I was trying to get the cast up on stage and people were like eating their lunch. And finally, I just yelled at them. I said, people, get on stage. Come on, this is feeling like Carmen again, right? I don't want to spend 4 hours getting on stage. Up on stage now. And I felt bad because Jen was already on stage. She was not one of the problem people. So at the end of rehearsal, I said to her, Jen, I just want to say, I'm sorry I yelled at you when I yelled at everybody else. That wasn't appropriate. You're perfect. All my favorite directors yell. You yell at me whenever you want, John. Oh, come on. No, a director should yell. I'm convinced. All right, Jen. I'll never yell at you again, but okay. I appreciate that. Oh, and you know what? We made it into an epic anyway, become like one of my productions anyway, because we got this children's ballet company, these little girls in this ballet company, and they had their little toe shoes, right? And they became all the other characters. They were the cats. They were the dew fairies. And best of all, they were the little witches. We got little, pointed hats for them, little black witches hats for them, little black witches capes. And there were like dozens of little girls running around the audience at one point, screaming. It was about Purgis next. It was insanity. I loved it. It was great. And the audience went crazy. They were like covering their ears. And the security guard came into the theater because he thought somebody was like killing somebody. It was a completely insane, wonderful production. And it was a perfect collaboration between all of us. It was a dream. It was a beautiful production with that set. It was silly with all that silly behavior. And it was well rehearsed. I was so proud of it. And the best part about it, we would do it all again next year. It would be revived next year with the same group of people. I was so happy. And the executive director said, I want you to direct it next year. I insist. So I called up the executive director and I told her, you know what I want to do now? I want to do with your company a drama, a real Italian opera drama. I want to do Pagliacci. Pagliacci? That sounds interesting. Can you cast it? Do you have good enough people for Pagliacci? I think I do. I know a Neda who I think would be wonderful. And I've got a wonderful person to sing Canio. He already knows the role. So Pagliacci is an amazing opera because it's about a theater company. And they're touring Italy, putting on this play. And there's Neda, who's the leading lady. And then there's Canio, her husband, married, right? But Neda is having a relationship with Silvio, this guy, right? And Canio finds out about it. And in the middle of a performance, he decides to stab both of them. But the audience, the onstage audience doesn't know it's not the real thing. They think it's the play, right? And he's like chasing them around, stabbing them. It's incredible. It's so well written. And she found Amazing performers, amazing. The Silvio was good. He wasn't great, he was good. But the Neda, she was phenomenal. She was great. In the big scene where she's being chased with a knife, she kept acting like the play was going on. She knew that if, she confessed to anything, the audience wouldn't help her, right? But she had to keep the play going and get the audience with her and hopefully help her. It was an amazing scene. Now, she had some problems with the lover, with Silvio. They were singing, and they were like holding hands and looking at each other, and it had no energy. So I said, listen, don't just hold hands, touch each other's faces, stroke each other's hair, kiss each other once in a while, go cheek to cheek, hold each other and rub each other's backs. And they started to do it, and it was magical. They looked like they were in love. But the best scene was Canio, this actor, Fred. Fred was great. And when he decided to kill his wife, he was shouting at her, shouting with his knife and chasing her around the stage. And she was like trying to stay in character and trying to keep the play going, because if she kept the play going, she probably wouldn't get stabbed. And it was electric. And the audience was like ripping its seat. And the onstage audience, which was watching the play within the play, they were like clapping and laughing. And it was like horrific. And finally, he stabbed Silvio. Oh! Silvio fell hard on the stage. I said, fall hard, bar home. Oh! And then he stabbed Netta. I said, fall hard, fall hard. And then he says, the play is finished. And he grabs the curtain and yanks it shut. Those actors nailed it. I was so impressed. Every night they went out there and they nailed it. It was great. I was like, wow, 2 operas. I'm directing opera again and getting paid. And great people. And I'm working with Jan, and she's grown as a performer. So I was in bliss. And then things changed. Well, I told you earlier that operas are always double cast. And for some reason that first year, they weren't. They were not double cast. And it was a dream, because I could just work with one group of people and they could reliably do the stuff, right? Well, the next year came around for Hansel and Gretel, and there were 2 new actors. There was a new Hansel and new Gretel. So there'd be, Yuki and Jen, they would go on some nights, and this other Hansel and Gretel would go on the other nights. Well, they were really tough to deal with. They weren't very friendly, and they were kind of unpredictable on stage. They kind of didn't do everything that we had worked on in rehearsal, and they were just mean. They were mean to the other actors. And they excited in me the worst possible emotion as a director, and that's like appeasement. I became a major ass kisser when somebody's like really mean. I'm like, hi, how are you? It's so good to see you. I heard you're getting engaged. How exciting. I just become like this clown, and it just sort of feeds their power, and they just got more and more obnoxious. So we would have these rehearsals, and I would be like rehearsing with the Gretels. So Jen would be sitting there taking notes like, she should. And I'd be there with the other Gretel, the new Gretel. And I'd be like, okay, this is where you pick up the cat and you throw it at Hansel. You throw the cat at Hansel, okay? Why do I do that? Well, you're angry at Hansel, so you pick up the cat and throw it at Hansel. But why? Well, I mean, it's funny, it's not a real cat, it's a stuffed cat. And when you throw it, this guy backstage goes into the microphone, he goes, wow, and the audience loves it, the kids love it. I don't want to do that. Well, no, it's not a real cat. It's not mean towards cats. It's it's like a stuffed cat. It's fun. The audience loves it. I don't think I'm going to do that. Well, I think this is what we do. That's the blocking. That's what Jen did last year. It was great. So yeah, yeah. I'm not going to do that. Okay. And I was like, why am I here? Why am I directing this thing? But if you're not going to do it, then what? I can just stay at home and you can just do whatever you want, which is exactly what they did. The other Hansel and Gretel just did what they wanted. They weren't funny. They weren't sad. They were just boring. And so it was like impossible, because I'd be inviting people to come see the show, and they'd say, oh, I'm going to come. I'd be like, oh, what night are you going to come? I think I'll come Tuesday. Tuesday was like a night with the other Hansel and Gretel. I was like, don't come on Tuesday. Come on Thursday. Why? Plumbing. The plumbing on Tuesday is bad. It backs up. Yeah, if you want to use the bathroom, you better come on Thursday. Come on Thursday. I was like, always like trying to figure out how to get people to come on the right nights. And it just was like, what? And then Payachi, my idea, my production, and it finally got double cast. It got its own cast. Now the Canio, the replacement Canio, the guy that went on for Fred at the time, was all right. He was not like Fred. He wasn't great, but he was loud. And he was, a big guy, and he was good enough. The other Neda, we rehearsed everything, all of her fear, all of her romance, all of her yelling at her husband in those scenes. We rehearsed all of it. She had it down, and then she got in front of an audience and she forgot it. She forgot it. She was doing nothing but singing. She just stood and sung. She just wouldn't do it. And when Silvio was singing to her romantically, she was just standing there like a rock, singing in his face. And when her husband was chasing her on the stage, she didn't move. He like ran towards her and he was just standing there with a knife and she wouldn't go anywhere. It was a disaster. And I got so frustrated that at the second performance, I flew in this huge screen and projected scenes of Faye Dunaway making out with other Hollywood movie stars. I mean, just to give the audience some passion, it was like Faye Dunaway with Steve McQueen, Faye Dunaway with William Holden, Faye Dunaway with Warren Beatty. It was like, what the hell did that have to do with anything? But I was desperate to turn up the heat because the singer wouldn't do it. So the dream was ending. I was waking up from it. And then the low point was the third year that we did Hansel and Gretel. And I was still going back. I was still directing. I was still making the best of things. They were not my productions the way I loved them half the time when the other casts were on, but they were okay. Not so okay. I was deluded, but I kept going to rehearsal. I kept working. And the other Gretel, not Jen, the other Gretel had decided she didn't like the witch. She hated the witch. I don't know why, but she hated the witch. And she had this thing where she said, I don't like to be touched. I don't ever want to be touched. I'm like, what does that mean? So I said, well, you have to be touched just a couple times, and but it'll be safe. And if you feel uncomfortable, just tell us. So she agreed. And at one point, and it's in the score, the witch reaches out and touches her, puts her hand on the back of her neck. And we rehearsed this a couple times, and the witch had done it. And so we were rehearsing. I was working with one Gretel. Jen was sitting there taking notes, like she always did. The witch approached Gretel. She put her hand on the back of her neck, and Gretel said, take your fucking hands off me. Just don't touch me. I'm freaking tired of this bullshit. Just stop it. Shit, man. Fuck. Well, I don't know what to say. Jen was staring at me. That was the first thing I noticed. She was staring right at me. And the other Gretel was sort of like walking around the stage like a boxer in the ring, right? She was ready for action. I don't know what had happened. The witch looked mortified. And I said to the other Gretel, I said, are you okay? Did you get hurt? No, I just don't like being touched. Fuck. I said, you sure you're not hurt? Okay. So I didn't say anything, and I just sort of let things calm down. And I said, okay, well, why don't we go on with rehearsal? And I said to the witch, I said, don't actually touch Gretel, just put your hand close to her. It's like, your witchy powers. You don't need to actually touch her. Just get close enough to control her with your powers, and we'll just go on from there, okay? And Jen was still staring at me. And I realized what she wanted. She wanted me to yell at the other Gretel. She said she'd had enough. She had enough of this behavior, not taking direction, always in a bad mood, being mean to people. And now she was like swearing and having outbursts for no apparent reason. It was crazy. And she thought I should yell at her. She thought I should tell her, my way or the highway, out, get out. You don't do that in this rehearsal. You go home, and if you can't come back here and behave and, be like a collaborator, then you can't be in the production. But I didn't do it. I decided in that moment just to let things move forward. If it didn't happen again, I could control it. It was best to just move on. And Jen was staring at me through the whole thing. I just about had enough when the set showed up, which made me very happy because it had to be fixed. The set was a mess. It was falling apart. Now, the audience couldn't tell. The front of it looked great. The back of it was a catastrophe. The way it rigged to the fly system was all falling apart. And it was like being jury rigged every night with tape and nails. It was like at any moment it was going to like fall and crush a bunch of those chorus children or the little witches, or, it was dangerous. But the executive director had found somebody in Nevada who will fix it. He has a huge workshop in Nevada. It's like an airplane hangar. He will fix the set. So during this terrible week with this outburst and me feeling like half the time the show wasn't good because the Hansel and Gretel, the second Hansel and Gretel, which is boring, finally the set showed up and it was in much better shape. It had been beautifully fixed. And this guy had just been working on it alone. And he was, he was like an older gentleman. He was a big guy, and I was so impressed. And I went and looked at it from behind, and I saw that it was beautifully rigged and it was safe finally. I walked right up to him. I said, "Thank you so much. I can't tell you. That set is beautiful, front and back. Thank you. Thank you." Whatever. And he walked away from me. Whatever. What? That was weird. Also, the huge stink of alcohol when he said it. What? Well, one thing he had not done, which was on the work list, he was supposed to do was fix the cage. So there's this big cage that Hansel gets put in by the witch, and it wasn't really safe, and it's huge. And I thought, it might collapse. So I went up to him, I said, before we do the run through, is there anything we can do about the cage? I mean, you've done a lot of great work, but if you could just, slap something on it for now and make it safe, just, whatever. And he went over to the corner of the theater and he started throwing his tools into a bag. Fucking shit. That's a bullshit. Just nonsense. Coming down there. It's ridiculous. I was like, what the hell's his problem? Again, I was almost knocked over by the butane breath of his. And I was like, what? So I got some gaff tape and I went up on stage and I taped the thing together. And he sat there in the audience staring at me, mumbling. I was like, what is he going to do? Kill me? It was like horrible. I thought that was it. That's it. The chaos had returned. Things had gotten better. I loved working with half the people. I loved doing the shows. We figured out how to rehearse and get good singing and get exciting action, but there was all this kind of weirdness around the edges of it. The chaos was coming back. And you know something? I didn't need the money anymore. I had other work. I was doing well again. I was writing and directing plays again. I was teaching again. I was just doing this because it was fun, right? Well, it stopped being fun. So I didn't do it the next year. And that was the last time I directed any opera. Too complicated, too volatile, too many compromises on my part, right? Sometimes it worked beautifully, and other times it just all sort of fell apart. Too frustrating. So I stopped it with that opera company. And my one regret was that Jen and I never talked about what happened. I'm sure she thought I should have, yelled at that person, reamed them, right? But I didn't. And I wasn't going to agree with her or back down. But I think if we talked, we would have felt better about it. I would have, said, I just thought that was the better part of wisdom. And she would have said, you should have yelled at her, fired her, gotten her out of here. And I said, well, we disagreed. We could agree to disagree, but I never did. And from that day to this, we haven't talked. I don't know why. I was too pig-headed, I'm the director. I don't have to explain myself, but, I was so impressed with her. I'd known her for so long that, I should have explained myself. And there I was, years later, watching Trial by Jury that Gilbert and Sullivan played. Remember, that's where we started. And I remembered who that person was on stage. At the center of this huge operetta, it was Jen. There she was singing in the middle of this gigantic operetta. I was like, wow, she's still at it. And she looks great. She looks like a queen up there. Such commanding presence, beautiful voice. It's not a very good operetta, Trial by Jury. It's not one of the best by Gilbert and Sullivan. And the production wasn't very good either. I mean, it was gorgeous. This company has tons of money. There was this huge set and all these costumes and this big orchestra, but it was flat. It was wooden. It was boring. There was one character that was sort of insanely funny, and the rest of it was just inert. But Jen was magical. She had that beautiful voice. She had all that confidence, all that presence. She looked like a queen up there. And she didn't have 1 ounce of sensuality or passion. Never in the whole show. But you know, with Gilbert and Sullivan, that's probably okay. There isn't a lot of sensuality or sex or passion in the scripts anyway. So, you know, she could just sing beautifully and command the stage, and it was enough. And I sat there thinking, I'm glad she found a home. I'm glad she found a place to be. I'm glad she found a place where it didn't matter that she didn't have that crazy UC Berkeley stuff, that wild passion. She could just have a commanding presence on stage and sing in that beautiful voice. It's funny, when the opera was over, they had like a curtain speech, and she came out and made it on behalf of the company. And she talked about what they had coming up, and she gave away some raffle prizes, and she was like a mom. She was great. She was just like her performance. It was completely safe and warm and welcoming. And she didn't convince me that this was the way to go with music theater. I'd learned working with her earlier, but with the people in Pagliacci, I'd learned that people could be crazy wonderful on stage and still hit the beautiful notes. But she was a hostess. That's what she was after that opera. I didn't go backstage. I didn't say hi afterwards. I don't know. I was still pig-headed about what had happened. It was ugly. It was terrible, but we'd gotten through it. And I bet she would have been fine. I bet she would have said to me, "Hi, John. Look at you. I'm so glad you're here." I was glad to be here too, Jen. You were great. Such a voice. You're going to say I wasn't crazy enough. No, your character wasn't crazy. So you don't need to be crazy. I know. I'm working on the crazy. Maybe you use me in a play one day and I can be wild crazy. Yeah? Maybe, Jen. Maybe. It's interesting, when I was preparing this piece, I sat in the bedroom because it's about beds and sensuality and sex, but I'll start here. I woke up late one night just before I started putting the piece together, and guess what? I felt so guilty about Jen. How I'd spent all this time knowing her and first thought she was like a mediocre student, didn't really remember her, then had this great experience with her, then had a passionate moment between us where she was staring at me. That was passion. I should have told her that. That's what you need to do. That stare. And then that final performance. And I always felt bad that I hadn't reached out to her. Oh, well, all kinds of things inspire a piece. But it all started right here, laying in the bed, tossing and turning one night. It's funny. I was thinking about passionate performances, and there is an incredible performance on film, which everybody should watch. If they want to see how passionate opera can be, watch Maria Callas and Tito Gobi doing the second act of Tosca. It's an old black and white film, and it is amazing, those two. They throw each other around the stage. They sing in each other's faces. They beat on each other. They are great together. And she was one of the greatest sopranos of all time, maybe the greatest. And she could act like nobody's business. She was a great actress, physical, sensual, crazy, wild. She should have gone to UC Berkeley. That's what I recommend for people. I saw Tosca at the Metropolitan Opera, and it was very, very controlled, very staid, very, very simple. The singing was beautiful. The singers were Montserrat Caballé and Luciano Pavarotti. Nobody sings better, but it was very no passion. And when I saw that same scene with Cornell McNeil, right? They just sort of walked around the stage. And when she finally stabbed him, she just barely shoved the knife in him. I was surprised it went in, right? And he just collapsed on the stage. Look at the Maria Callas and Tito Gobi. The best book about opera, for my money, is The Queen's Throat by Wayne Kostenbaum. It's all about homosexuality and opera. It's about opera queens and how opera queens love opera and they live for opera. They adore the divas. And it's a very sad book. And I realized reading it this week that I spent a lot of my life avoiding being an opera queen. I didn't want to like negate my own existence. I didn't want to give it all over to worshiping somebody else's performative skills. I wanted to live my own life. I wanted to have a husband. I wanted to do theater. I wanted to go up and be crazy myself. But this book is amazing because it's all an analysis of what an opera queen is. How you give all of yourself to the worship of a great diva like Maria Callas. You just worship Maria Callas the rest of your life. Travel around the world to see your diva. Try to meet your diva. Throw roses to your diva, right? I think entertainment can be very dangerous that way. It can seduce us into stop thinking about ourselves. But if you get too deep into entertainment and just enjoying it as a spectator, I think a self-loathing settles in. That's a danger too. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. I'll be back next Saturday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 5 p.m. Pacific Time with a new piece. And then in 2 weeks on Sunday, February 27th, in the afternoon at 2 p.m. and 4 p.m., I have a live performance right here in New York City at a place called Arts on Site, which is at 12 St. Mark's Place in the East Village. How cool is that? And it's called Shark. And it's based on a piece that I did at the very beginning of COVID, right? When I started doing all these things online. But now I'll be live on stage battling a shark. So if you're in New York, please join me for that. Please join me next week for my piece on Saturday night. And more than anything, thank you so much for being here tonight. You were a terrific audience. Yay! Good night.